Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I've just hit the record button, so just to remind everyone, these sessions will be recorded. And when we get the recording back, we will post it on our website at the MSU Local Government Center, as well as we'll share it with MACo to share on their website. I'd like to welcome everyone out to our semi-weekly, I guess bi-weekly stakeholder. I'm sorry, not stakeholder. We're calling this what are we calling this? A town hall meeting. There we go. It's a town hall meeting. Clearly, I facilitate way too many of these meetings via Zoom. We're glad you're able to join us today. We do this at the Local Government Center in partnership with the Montana Association of Counties. We host these bi-weekly meetings for you folks to have an opportunity to talk about current events, what's going on, and help guide you through, inform you on what's going on at the legislative session and other issues that might be important to counties. So we welcome you all here. As I said, my name is Dan Clark. I'm the director of the Local Government Center. Joining us on this call is Jane McDonald. She's our program manager at the center, and she's going to help me facilitate this meeting. We also have Eric Bryson and Jason and Chantel from MACo. They've joined us as well to give us an update. I'll just go through some quick housekeeping for those of you that are not familiar with our WebEx platform. But you'll see on the bottom of your screen, you'll have several buttons there. One of is to unmute or mute. And I have it set up to when everyone joins the meeting, you'll automatically be muted. But if you have a question or you'd like to make a comment, when we call on you, you can then unmute and then respond to, or ask your question or respond with a comment. In order to ask a question, if you go over to the side on the right-hand side, or if you click on participants, you can see if you hover over your name, it'll light up your name and there will be a hand, and you can raise your hand, and then we can see that if you've got a question, raise your hand and then we'll go ahead and call on you. And if you're calling in from a phone, you can *6 and that will unmute you and allow you to make your comment or ask your question. I think that's about all we have for housekeeping. Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and get started? We'll go ahead and turn the time over to Eric and the folks from MACo to give us an update on the legislative session and anything else they'd like to share with us. So you want to start off, Eric? Can you unmute, or am I? Oh dear, let me see if I can fix that. There we go, try it now.
I thought you were doing it so I wouldn't talk today.
I have a tight control over the meeting, that's true.
It's one of two things. It's one of two things. Either Dan doesn't know how to do it or he doesn't want me to talk. Both of those are true. Welcome, folks. Well, I want to start with some happy news, and hopefully you've already received the invitation or at least the announcement. We are going to have our MACo Midwinter Conference as we normally do. It's a little bit later than it is this year for several reasons. But March 25th, 26th, and 27th, and as normal, we would have it in Helena, but this year it's going to be in beautiful Butte, America. As you can imagine, it's in Butte because we had a difficult time dealing with the population limitations that are imposed in Lewis and Clark, Cascade, Gallatin, and some other counties. Butte was gracious enough to say that our maximum capacity was in the 200s rather than in the 50s and 60s that we got from some of the other communities. And Butte's only an hour away from Helena if there is action up at the legislature that we need to pay attention to or participate in. Our plan and the draft agenda is still a little bit in flux right now. I can tell you that we did get confirmation from the governor. He will be our presenter on Friday the 26th at lunch, and we are trying to fill the new agency directors, department heads, and leadership staff from his new administration in the basically around in the first half day, second full day, and third half day if necessary. We have confirmation from who else did we, Jason? Oh, Rosendale. He'll be there. I think we put him in the time slot at 10:30 on Friday in the morning. And again, these are all a little bit subject to change based on their their schedules, but we'll keep filling in and keep giving you updates. The conference will have a ability for, we're still talking about this, but we'll have ability for a Zoom link, but it's going to be basically a non-participatory Zoom link. We can't monitor questions or have the two-way dialogue for most of the sessions that we're contemplating with Zoom. So if you don't want to come in person or can't come in person, we'll allow you a Zoom link for a nominal fee to be able to watch, but that's all in progress right now. Anything that I left out, Chantel or Jason, about the conference?
Just a correction. End of February, not end of March.
Oh, yeah. February 25th, 26th, and 27th.
I have been in contact with Senator Daines' office too. I'm waiting to hear back from them.
It sounds like he's going to be in town, and I think we're hopeful that he'll be there in person too. We just haven't had confirmation. All right, so with that, we're going to do a rundown of some legislation. I want to, as always, let you guys know, raise your hand, wave your arms, bug Dan to get permission, and interject anytime that you want to, and we'll also allow for questions to be at the end. But I'm going to go through the last 2 weeks of bills that we've addressed through our executive committee and taken positions on or just put on our watch. Yeah.
Before you start that, do you want to talk about the governor's request, or do you want to do that at the end?
Tell me what the governor's request was.
For one paragraph.
Oh,
The red tape.
red tape. Thank you. See, I'm a little distracted because we have been called into the governor's administration offices on Monday, and I thought he wanted me to talk about our that thing. The good news, again, good news. I did receive a call from the governor. I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. And as you might recall, one of his first actions in office was to issue an executive order trying to address bureaucratic red tape in the state administration. And he has reached out to MACo in particular and asked for our county commissioners and elected officials at the local level to start addressing complaints, concerns, or bureaucratic frustrations you have in dealing with your state agencies. What he would like is two paragraphs, one paragraph identifying the problem and one paragraph proposing a reasonable solution to the problem. When he discussed that with me, I kind of joked and I said, do you really want 10,000 gravel permit and gravel complaint letters coming your way? And he kind of laughed and said, yeah, that's exactly what he wants. Frustrations you've had with any state agency dealing with anything, he wants it identified in a paragraph and then a proposed solution identified in a paragraph. If membership would like, MACo can facilitate those and get them to the right person. He does have a specific point person that he's put in charge of this initiative, a staffer in the governor's office. And I asked her to participate in this call. It was a little short notice. There might be some opportunity for follow-up, but when I talked to her, she basically just said, no, that you can submit them as you need to. If you want to funnel them through MACo, that's just fine, and we'll get them to the right people. If you need more clarification on what they're asking for, please ask now or anytime in the future. What else did I forget before we get into legislation?
You're good now for me.
So for those of you not on our executive committee, I put an item on our agenda for all our board meetings that says things that Eric forgot. We might want to have that as a standing reoccurring agenda item for these meetings too, and we'll do that at the beginning. Jumping into legislation, Senate Bill 19 and Senate Bill 50. If you recall, 2 sessions ago, a last-minute move, unexplainable and still unexplained, to take the Board of Crime Control and transfer it out of the Department of Justice as a standalone entity with good representation from local government and put it as a bureau under the Department of Corrections. We adamantly opposed that bill, and it was some strange, weird last-minute negotiation that ended up transferring it out, ostensibly to save money and resources. But, you know, as you know, the Board of Crime Control has always been a really good, functional distribution point for local government resources, particularly in the law enforcement arena, as it functioned under Department of Justice. It had good governor appointees and good local government representation to ensure that grants that were applied for from the state were meeting the needs of the local governments. It changed dramatically, in my opinion, under Department of Corrections. So Senate Bill 19 is very specifically transferring that back to Department of Justice. That bill had its hearing, I think, a week and a half ago. And surprisingly, and I think a good sign for us, is that the Department of Justice came in and supported that move back. There have been new appointments made in the Board of Crime Control, and so they're tentative at least until it transfers back over to the Department of Justice. But we didn't weigh in on Senate Bill 19, but we consider this to be a good move. It was heavily supported by the law enforcement community and the sheriffs and peace officers in particular. I'll jump to Senate Bill 15, Chantel, if you want to talk about accessibility for disabled voters.
Yeah, Senate Bill 15, accessibility for disabled voters. This is carried by Senator Ellis. It came out of an interim study out of the State Administration and Veterans Affairs Committee. We participated and the clerks participated. It cleans up a lot of statutes. It also revises references to federal law. It says that schools have to have accessibility equipment available during their elections. You can't charge for the purchase or routine maintenance of those voter interface devices, but you can charge for the programming of the device for the election and replacement, repairs, or maintenance after the election. There also has to be a voter interface device available during mail ballot elections at locations appropriate to provide accessibility to disabled electors. This is a little vague, but it's meant to be a little vague. So just if it's appropriate for the disabled electors, then that's where you put the machine. If it's not, then you don't. So, I mean, kind of common sense, and work with your county attorney. There is an exception for these requirements, and it's for areas with fewer than 200 registered electors. And irrigation districts are exempt as well. So that is 15.
You want to jump to SB 93?
92. Yes.
Sorry, 92 and 93.
Senate Bill 92. You guys might be a little familiar with this one. I've been blasting you this week about it. Disallow appointed election administrators is just like it sounds. Currently, it would only have affected 8 counties that appoint their election administrators. However, it does affect you all because it would have taken that flexibility completely away from you. Thank you to everyone who reached out. We did kill that bill on the Senate floor, which is a difficult task considering it was the majority whip's bill. So good job. Any questions about that one? Okay, I'll go to 93. This is another Vance bill. It allows poll watchers to be at places of deposit. This is already a thing. It's already happening. It's just putting it into law so that it's clear that poll watchers can be at a place of deposit and watch. And then Eric, I want to do one more.
Please do.
One last bill, House Bill 50. This is Garner's 911 bill that takes the $250,000 off the top of the 911 account to help fund the state library in their efforts to do annual GIS assessments and provide some GIS support to counties. I have heard that Representative Skis wants to amend the bill to take that entirely out of your quarterly distribution. I have some feelings on why he's doing that. I think it might be because he knows it'll kill the bill, but I don't know for sure. Regardless of that, if you have members on the Energy and Telecommunications Committee, reach out to them and tell them to vote no on his amendment. He is the chair, so it's going to be difficult. I talked to some other people involved in this. They said that Garner can get the amendment stripped on the floor, so that would be pretty handy, and then we go to the Senate and see what happens there. But if it does make it on the floor, you might be getting an email from me to try and kill the bill. So be ready for that. Okay, I'm done.
You're not done. I have more for you to come. Next bill on our list is SB 89. Senator Regier. It's a law dealing with the collection of union dues, and essentially it just prohibits the collection of union dues for public employment. I just tried to look it up real fast to see what the status of that bill is, and it looks like there are amendments that the committee is still contemplating. MACo did not weigh in on that bill at all, but it was of interest to a number of our members. Here's an interesting one. HB 1, interesting is bad. That's generally what it means when I say interesting. HB 183, it eliminates the requirement that offenders pay the public defender fees. It removes entirely the section of code that allows for repayment of public defender fees. I bring this up because I hope you all recall the discussion in last session about the reductions in the entitlement share payments, specifically to offset the increased cost of the state running the public defender system. One of our arguments in that discussion in the last legislative session was that the potential revenues generated from partial payments or enforcing of the statutory provisions allowing for payments of public defender costs could help on the revenue side with the cost of the public defender system. And what we estimated was that if they just collected, and this is from their own numbers, the public defender's numbers, if they only collected 10% of the costs, and remember if you're represented by a public defender, the statute allows for that fee to be $250 for a misdemeanor and $800 for a felony. If they only collected 10% of that eligible fee, they generate about $1.2 million in revenue annually. 10%. So if you just make an assumption that the vast majority of people that are qualified for public defenders likely can't afford a lot, but there's a good chance that a small percentage of them could be able to pay that fee. Routinely, it's waived. Routinely, the public defender's office makes a recommendation that the court waive it. Routinely, the court holds hearings and then waives it based on the public defender's request. I think that was the basis for the legislation moving forward, and our position was still that there's a small percentage likely of those assigned a public defender that could pay that nominal fee for their cases. In 2019, the total collections for the public defender's office for these fees that are built in statute was $270,000. Now remember, if 10% was collected, they generate $1.2 million, but they collected 270. So our position last session and our position this session would be that either the public defender's office process to be assigned counsel or enforcement of those able to pay and eligible to pay for those costs ought to be looked at rather than taking the entitlement share from local governments. That's why I bring it up. I want to talk about Senate Bill 77. Senate Bill 77 was supported by the Montana Association of Counties by our executive committee for some pretty strict provisions. Senate Bill 77 came out of the Yellowstone County Billings area specifically because the sponsor, Senator McGilvery, had some concerns about cities and towns shifting general fund obligations into special districts. And so he drafted a bill that said if you're a jurisdictional-wide special district, you're going to be limited in what you can do for assessments in subsequent years. And he put a provision in that allowed for a rational and inflationary adjustment on special district assessments. He also put a provision on for those jurisdictional-wide special districts created under that part that they would sunset within a period of time. Subsequent amendments made it be 10 years or 15 years, and as it stands right now, it is a automatic death of the special district in 15 years. It allows now a provision to say that you can submit a question to the voters for continuing that. So to be clear, MACo supported that when it was jurisdictional wide and when it allowed for an easy process to allow for the special district to continue. And then we raised concerns about bonding. So if you have a project that has debt or you're still paying off that debt for bonding or whatever source might be applicable to the special district, that his bill didn't impact newly created special districts from being able to get the funding that they needed to do the projects that were contemplated. And private bond counsel came in the hearing and made the same recommendations that we did. In essence, you needed to tighten the dissolution process up so it wouldn't scare the private sector and the market from being able to use bonding as a way to get projects done. And the senator at the time was supportive of that. There have been a flurry of amendments. And the bill as it stands right now applies to all special districts created under that part, not just jurisdictional wide. It has the provision that it gets discontinued or dissolved within the 15-year period. The bond council, the private market bond council, still has great concerns about the way that bonding is included in provisions in the bill. In essence, that you have to bond for a project within the first 7 years of the special district, or you can't bond. And And the concern from the private market bond council is that it's still not satisfactory enough with the limitations and an inflationary growth factor to be able to service the debt for the existing districts that are out there. And it's retroactively applicable. MACo does not support Senate Bill 77, and because it's entirely different than it first started. And I think between the sponsor, the drafter, MACo, and the league, it's still unclear how it impacts those existing special districts that are out there. If you've created a special district by petition or protest, I believe it applies to your special district. So it would have implications on how you can bond, how you can operate, what your inflationary adjustments might be, what your assessments could be in the future. I don't believe the senator thinks that that's the way that it works, and I'm not sure that the drafter thinks that's the way that it works. And I don't want to have the bill go into law to find out how it works, because bond council is still raising the same concerns that they had about being able to fund special district projects. So MACo opposes SB 77 as it stands. They were going to do executive action this morning on it, and it's been continued in Senate tax. I'm asking anybody that has any interest in making sure that your special districts can function the way that you intended them to be functioning, get a hold of members of Senate tax and please ask them to please vote to table or kill SB 77 as it's presented right now. Any questions on that one?
In particular, if you are from Cascade County or Gallatin County, Senator Sales and Senator Hoban.
Please.
I think we've got Sales, but he said a couple calls from home would be helpful. And I think Hoban is the swing vote. So a little bit of help on those two, and I think we're good. But shore up all the rest if you can.
Jason, do you want to talk about your HB 200 Sanctuary Cities bill?
No.
That's across the floor, right?
Yes, I believe it is.
So the reason I bring it up, folks, is that there were conversations before in the last 4 years about some counties wanted to designate sanctuary cities for abortion, so abortion-free counties. They wanted to adopt resolutions that would say things like, we're an abortion-free county, or we are a sanctuary county for Second Amendment rights. And as we talk to their civil attorneys and their county attorneys and their commissioners, we always continue to recommend that that's a really bad idea. And the alternate is true in our opinion too. Designating sanctuary cities is probably bad when a city wants to do it for immigration enforcement. We still think that it's a bad idea when you want to do it for federal gun law enforcement or Second Amendment rights or abortion. I don't know what the status of this bill will look like as it goes through, but I assume that it's going to pass.
The governor's said he's going to sign it. So,
SB 125, revise certain junk disposal laws. Jason?
So this is a bill last session that we helped support. Basically creates a little cutout of 20% of the junk vehicle money for non-mobile disposal. It's worked pretty well in the counties that have implemented it. We simply asked for 2 more years to see if it expands into additional counties. The program isn't changing any. We had no opponents. It sailed right out of committee and heading to the other side, I believe.
HB 148 is another interesting one. It revises. Did I talk over somebody? All right. HB 148 revises the property reappraisal cycle for class 3 and 4 properties. Guess what? To a 6-year cycle. So this is for residential and timber parcels. But remember, we just switched from a 6-year reappraisal with phase-in to a 2-year reappraisal, and now this bill intends to move back to a 6-year reappraisal. When property values are declining, residential property taxpayers were concerned that through the last recession that they were paying higher appreciable values in taxes for their property and wanted a faster reappraisal cycle. Now that property values are appreciating, it seems like there's a move to slow and exaggerate the impacts of those inflationary adjustments for appreciating values back in the property tax system. MACo didn't take a position on that. I just bring it up because it's informational. Chantel, SB 107.
Senate Bill 107, extend the close of regular registration until 10 days before Election Day. This is carried by Senator Bennett it was tabled, it would have allowed the voters 20 more days to register regularly before restrictions are put on the final 10 days. So it'd be similar to how it was the last two elections for the general and the primary. It would have paired really well with House Bill 176, which removes same-day voter registration and replaces it with, it was supposed to be the Friday before, but it's been amended now to be Monday at 4 is when late registration would end. So if these two would have gone together, it would have helped election administrators and clerk and recorders more, because you'd have less and less people at your county leading up to the election. The committee, I think, was just confused, and sometimes politics gets in the way, and down she went. So that one didn't pass. But on that note, House Bill 176 is moving forward, and you've probably seen that in the news. So that's it.
House Bill 191 by Hopkins. It revises residential property tax credit for the elderly. This is an elderly tax credit that's generally funded through the general fund. When you're eligible for the tax credit, then that's paid back by the general fund, as opposed to being a shift in the burden of the property taxpayers to the rest of the property taxpayers. He wants to increase what the amount of eligible credit is. The MACo Executive Committee reviewed the bill and supported it, primarily because it's a reasonable increase and because it's funded by the general fund and not a shift in property taxes. HB 298 by Representative Galloway is a tax appraisal notice bill. In essence, what it says is that your appraisal notice from Department of Revenue will have information from the previous year or previous appraisal and an explanation that if the variance is greater than 10%, why? His goal is to try and see if Department of Revenue appraisal notices with an explanation for that variance will reduce the number of county and state tax appeal boards or AB 26 applications. We looked at the bill as it was an LC, and I just checked the bill as it came out as HB 298, and it looks to do exactly what he said. And so MACo is supporting that bill. It is the revenue appraisal notice, and it's just I'll call it a sunshine law bill. So and I think the intent is, and I think the goal would be that it would reduce AB 26s if there was an explanation on why your appraisal varied by that 10%. And he's also interested in, at least at one time, talking about what that percentage might be, 15%, 10%, but the bill is drafted as 10. Senate Bill 165 that had a hearing this week, and it's a bill that moves the sanitation review for subdivisions away from the Department of Environmental Quality and onto local boards of health. The hearing was really interesting. It was about 90% testimony from folks in the Flathead, so thank you, Flathead County, for this bill coming forward. There are a bunch of engineers, I would say across the state, but it seemed to be primarily, at least the proponent testimony came from Flathead County, with really good examples of significant delays and dysfunctions of the Department of Environmental Quality for what sounded like should be relatively routine review and approval process for certificates of subdivision, the final review of subdivision, sanitation and water and well issues. MACo opposed the bill, and I wanted to jokingly say in committee that Senator Glimm is the sponsor of it. I wanted to say that Senator Glimm is the only person in the building that's trying to give more authority to boards of public health. I didn't say that, although I still think it would have been a funny joke. Our opposition testimony was based on the shifting of the technical responsibilities for subdivision review to counties. Some of you can handle this. Some of you already have, through regulations and through the certification process, your sanitarians doing subdivision review that ultimately goes to the Department of Environmental Quality for final review. And it's none of our business as your association to get involved in that process. But 50 of the 56 counties don't, and subdivision review being transferred down to the Board of Health to require sanitarians to have the technical expertise and promulgate their own rules and regulations seemed to be a bad idea from our perspective. I was expecting executive action to happen on that today. I just got a text message that it seems like the committee is going to continue it. The other position that I wanted to make in front of the committee is that we have a new administration. We have a new Department of Environmental Quality director. And I think there's an opportunity for the dysfunctions that were clearly presented in that committee in-house with DEQ need some time to be addressed by a new governor with new expectations and a new director. I still don't think that 56 counties with 56 separate and distinct and wholly created sanitary and water regulations is probably the way to get uniformity, which is what the proponents of the bill seemed to want. HB 271. This is an interesting one, and this is up for hearing on Monday. HB 271 comes out of Ravalli County and is intended to address their weird orchard track situation. Previously old platted subdivisions with undetermined public nature of their roads. What it says, though, and I'll cut to the chase in the non-legal verbiage, is that if you're reviewing subdivisions and the subdivision roads are county roads, you have to, by resolution, acknowledge acceptance of those subdivision roads as county roads. There's some confusion out there, I think, among our membership, and frankly, there's confusion all over in the statutes about what is a public road, what is a county road, what is a road that the county can exercise jurisdiction over. And so our testimony is going to, MACo's testimony is going to be in support of this bill because it just clarifies and cleans up what and how a county road through subdivision review becomes a county road. Not all public roads under the county's jurisdiction are county roads, but all county roads are public roads. And that's the essence of this bill. Gallatin County has great reservations about how this would impact the way that they have treated subdivision roads, public roads, RIDs in the past, and we're trying to work through some of the details with them directly so we could still be in support and have a proposal for at least an amendment that looks like an applicability clause on this bill. I encourage you all, if you have any interest in roads and the public nature of roads, to read the bill, and if you have concerns, give them to me. The hearing is Monday, and MACo's still going in support, just based on the fact that it does provide a level of clarity for acceptance of subdivision roads as county roads, should you choose that. Senate Bill 161. Senate Bill 161 was an interim committee working group trying to find a way to provide for a meaningful statutory authority for expedited review for subdivisions. I don't believe anybody thinks Senate Bill 161 is perfect. Senator Esp is the one that's carrying it on behalf of the group that worked together. Tara DePue, our land use attorney, worked on this over the interim. MACo did not take a position on Senate Bill 161. Again, I think it was Gallatin County that opposed it for a number of reasons, and there's some ag concerns about the bill in essence. But we've had an expedited review provision in statute, I think, since 2013, if memory serves, and it's never been used, ever. The reason that this bill came about is to try and find a way for what was contemplated in that earlier expedited review process to actually work. If you have the water and sewer capabilities, you can waive some of the environmental what would be perfunctory review provisions in your subdivision review. We'll watch this one. I think there might be a movement afoot to take water and sewer districts out of it, and there might be a move to take counties out entirely. And if that's the case, we'll just continue to watch it. But I want to put it on your radar because it did provide a level of discomfort for us as your staff when certain members opposed bills that we might have had some hand in writing. FYI, Senator Ellsworth has an idea to change the threshold for public works contracts, and he handed that idea off to Senator Manzella, and they want MACo to be involved in at least being engaged in discussions with the Contractors Association and any union representative about what a reasonable increase in the public contract threshold would be. It's Title 18.2401 that has the definition of a public contract, a public works contract. This is all about prevailing wage, folks, that you have to pay prevailing wage for any public contract that's in excess of $25,000. That's the current statutory threshold. Senator Ellsworth and Senator Manzella would like the number to go from $25,000 to $250,000. So prevailing wage would not be applicable for contracts for public works under $250,000. our executive committee reviewed this, and of course there would be cost savings associated with this. There'd be some convenience factors associated with smaller, what would be considered smaller contracts, 250,000 and less. And so the MACo is going to support this bill, but very specifically standing right behind the Contractors Association. This is not our attempt to pick a fight with unions or to mess with union dues or anything like that. And if we don't settle on 250, I think both the sponsors would be happy for this bill, but that will be an interesting conversation for us to engage in. Off the record, the Montana Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association has presented the MACo Executive Committee with a proposal to increase sheriff's deputies' pay. And as you know, the way that sheriff's deputies get paid is as a percentage of the sheriff's pay, so it has a direct impact on your salary compensation boards and your elected officials' pay. The 10,000-foot level is that the sheriffs would like to see their mandatory $2,000 increase above the base clerk and recorders increase to $5,000 and have that distributed down to the deputies as it normally would. They would also like to see the 1% longevity that's given to deputies be an automatic 1% longevity, as opposed to, as current law requires, that it's contingent on any adjustments to pay on the compensation board. So if in essence, and you commissioners know this, sometimes you do some really creative and contorted things with your salary compensation board to give elected officials, say, $1 a year raise, so your deputies will get that 1%. They just want that provision taken out that says that the compensation board and then the commission ultimately has to increase elected officials' pay for them to get their 1%. They also suggested a provision that says that even if the mandatory $5,000 they proposed base increase to the sheriff's pay could be increased at the discretion of the governing body. Theoretically, this is for some of our larger jurisdictions that might have more resources to be able to compensate their sheriffs above what that base plus 5,000 would be. And then their final provision was to change the matrix that's built in statute that says what percentages deputies and the undersheriff can be paid to. No matter what your population base is in those 4 different categories, you're limited to be 90% of the sheriff's pay. They want to move all those all to 95%. Now, that's not an automatic increase. That would allow for collective bargaining agreements if you're bargaining wages, or for your pay matrices if you have those adopted, to be able to get those positions under sheriff up to 98% and all the rest of your folks up to 95%. That's their proposal. The executive committee struggled with that and the quick financial analysis of what that would look like, and ultimately counter proposed that if the Sheriff and Peace Officers Association wanted to adjust pay, it should be elected officials' pay. So the counter proposal is, in essence, if MSPOA wants to make a run at increasing deputies, that everybody, all the elected officials, should have either a discretionary or mandatory $5,000 increase. That still will have a significant cost for all of you. For any of you that have sheriff's offices, small, medium, or large, it's still going to be an increased cost. And I'm not certain that the Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association is going to take that MACo suggestion and run with it. I'll find out, I hope today, if not throughout the weekend. They're still meeting and considering whether they want to run a bill that looks like a mandatory increase for elected officials across the spectrum. Recall this came about at our conference, and it was Missoula County that had a proposal that was just going to allow collective bargaining agreements to supersede those limitations for pay for sheriff's deputies. And instead of passing that resolution, membership said, well, let's just find out from MSPOA what it is they want. And of course, this all comes down to the discussion that's always been had with separating out deputies from electeds or sheriffs from the salary compensation board. And we're not to that point where that's part of the proposal at this point. I put that as an FYI because if the sheriffs bring their bill as is, MACo will likely oppose. If the sheriffs bring their bill with MACo suggestions, it's going to have an impact on every one of our counties. Jason, why don't you talk about HB 24?
House Bill 24, Representative Gunderson out of Lincoln County brought it on behalf of DES. In statute, there's a provision that when a disaster and emergency occurs, the governor has a $16 million pot of money to be used at his discretion. That pot of money is deployed to match federal dollars, whatever might be needed to supplement the fight with whatever the emergency is. Historically, those dollars have not been used, or just a small portion of them have been used. The premise of the original bill was to take half of the leftover money, which now all of it goes to the fire suppression fund, to take half of whatever's left over and divert it to DES for disaster mitigation, to match county money, or to be used by counties as match for federal money to mitigate everything from floods to fires to, whatever sort of natural disaster you can think of that's eligible through that program. As many of you know, we worked really hard in the interim with the NRC and ourselves and the fire folks and some DES folks, and came up with a strategy for enhancing the state fire cooperative program. And that included, the two major initiatives were some air fire support in eastern Montana, specifically Billings and Miles City, and then a multitude of other things related to training and additional help on the ground with managing fires and some communication stuff. When that bill popped, we have been actively looking for where we would ask for an appropriation to do what we wanted to do. And I latched onto it, thinking we could peel $2 million off the top of that $16 million that wasn't being used or hadn't been used historically, and then let whatever was left after that trickle down to the split. The general idea of it was pretty well received. Where I ran into issues with the sponsor was on the use of the dollars specific to the aviation. Right now, the DNRC has 2 helicopters that are sort of extra. They sit in Helena, and the idea was they would deploy those 2 units and staff them through DNRC. This particular representative thinks that they should be contracted to the private sector. I think that, and so we sort of got into a debate about what the best use was. And in the end, I said I didn't necessarily care how we got the fire support, but I wanted it to be in the best interest of the taxpayers, and it needed to go to eastern Montana. As we debated it, DNRC got nervous, DES got nervous, the second floor got nervous about the $2 million, and as we started monkeying with it, it got withdrawn by the sponsor. So Eric and I get to have a meeting with the governor's office, the DES folks, DNRC director, budget director on Monday, and have a conversation about what it is we wanted to do, what it is DES wants to do. What we will be explaining to them is we know that fires are growing in both frequency and severity. We know they're growing in frequency and severity in eastern Montana, where resources historically have not been available to the extent that they have been in the West, and we need to be thinking really hard about deploying those. We also know that they're getting worse in the West, and we need to enhance those services. And we think deploying these dollars for that, given that it's fire suppression money that it ends up being taken away from, makes the most sense to us. If there's leftover money after that, then we can debate the logistics of that and whether or not that's a good use. But our priority will be that we use those dollars to enhance the front end fire capability of the DNRC. So knowing we're meeting with the governor, knowing that bill has been withdrawn, I don't know if withdrawn means it can be put back in play, but I doubt it. We've dropped I found another sponsor, and we are dropping our own piece of legislation that does just what we want to do. And that is in drafting right now.
Regardless of what happens with HB 24, the new bill that we have out there, this is one that we're going to need all hands on deck, as much comment and support as we can to get the legislature and the governor's office and DNRC to support the concept of a better targeted investment in what I consider to be pre-disaster mitigation, i.e. fire resources on the ground, rather than grant programs for post-disaster mitigation, which I'm not saying aren't helpful, but if we have limited resources to invest, we ought to invest in the places that we know can save money. HB 104 has already made it through the House, over to the Senate, out into the Senate hearing, and I hope they'll do executive action today on that. This is our county leasing bill. It's one of those super easy ones that nobody has any questions on, and has been well supported. I think it had 2 no votes on the House side.
He's bragging
We
again.
have- what was that?
Said he's bragging again.
I took all the easy ones. I have another one too that I will talk about that. You recall the MACo resolution that allowed for county offices to be located outside of the county seat. I've been fielding some questions from an area in particular that wants to know if our bill would allow for all the county offices to be located outside of the county seat. And recall, I think it's Article 11 of the state constitution defines the county seat as, well, it defines the counties as what they're at, and the county seat can only be changed by a vote of the whole area that would be impacted by a change in the county seat. I would say if you by resolution moved all of your county offices outside of the county seat, that you would be in effect designating a new county seat, and that would take a vote. But there might be a movement to address and amend our bill that would prohibit it from allowing all county offices to be located outside of the county seat. I hope not, but that might happen. Dispatch cities, Jason?
Sure. No real updates on that other than we do have a hearing scheduled for next Thursday. I think Commissioner Strofe and Commissioner Gorder are coming in person. There was some conversation about from a senator that was looking to amend in an additional city. I've been working with him on a study resolution that I hope keeps him away, and I know he's got some contact from home, so that's lessened. I hope that has gone away, but we'll keep an eye on that. We'll know more next Thursday, but that one's in play. You want me to just run down all of mine that are in play, Eric?
Please.
Next Tuesday, we have our Dawson County resolution bill, which adds the ability for an RSID to put operational costs on an assessment for water and sewer projects. So in Dawson County, they have a rural SID that is a sewer system that connects to the city's treatment system. The city charges them for the operation of that system. All of the infrastructure costs are being assessed on the taxes, but statute does not allow, and bond council would not allow for them to put the actual billing for the operational costs on the assessment as well. So they're getting 2 bills when they really only need 1. This will correct that. This morning in Senate Tax, we heard Bighorn County's resolution bill, which allows counties with coal mines that are paying coal gross proceeds. And if that coal mine gets into arrears on their coal gross proceeds payments, or if they are acquired when they get acquired, if they're in arrears and the new company wants to take those over, it allows the county to enter into a payment plan for those delinquent taxes. We had a really good hearing this morning. We anticipated a lot of questions because although it's sort of simple to say it just allows them to enter into negotiations and into agreement, it gets a little bit complicated. And so we fielded a lot of questions, but I thought it went quite well. And yesterday afternoon, we heard Prairie County's resolution bill, which is to allow counties to form a special district where your federal lands or federal mineral royalty payments can go into. Anything that is a prior year payment, according to PILT, could go into that special district for the use designed by you in that special district, which would then get you backfilled because it would not be subtracted as a prior year payment in your PILT payment. So whatever that number is goes to your special district, can be used for roads or whatever you designate or whatever is required to go to, and then the county's budget still is made whole. So that's a good bill. We had a really good hearing. I expect that one will move out of committee first part of next week as well. Couple other touch-up ones. We talked about 24. Senate Bill 44, which was going to divert some of the county share of the fuel tax to tribal governments. That bill has died. House Bill 101, which was DEQ trying to set up its own brownfields program. I think that one is dead without a hearing. Some of you called about House Bill 169, and I'm not sure if we talked about this 2 weeks ago or not. That was the one with that we thought that folks were worried it was going to impact your rural firefighters. And we had conversations with the sponsor, and that was not how he had described the intent. When we started getting questions from you and some others about concerns that maybe there was something else buried in that bill, we reacted by not by going to the mic, but by ferreting out the answers via planting questions with the committee. The questions that we had folks ask certainly made it apparent that it was not a good piece of legislation, and it died with us out having to confront a legislator and get our fingerprints all over it. But please know that we were involved in that bill, and it is gone. That is, a few of you listened in when I testified in favor of the Treasure State Endowment Program, and I mentioned an amendment to that program that would allow counties and municipalities, for that matter, to, after they've submitted their application, if they want to get started on their project at their own risk. In other words, if you don't get the grant, you don't get the grant, or if you mess up the administration or any of the, don't follow state statute or anything, it's on you. But basically it gets you a year ahead. So if you have a bridge project and you submit your application, that bridge gets closed and you want to move forward as quickly as possible, this would allow you to do that after the application is submitted, basically shaving a year off. We worked with the Department of Commerce on wording that and trying to make them feel good. We thought we had an agreement with them. Matter of fact, I dropped it to the drafter for the amendment 2 days ago, and now Commerce has reached back out and said, well, we've changed our mind. We're not really that comfortable. We have another call with them on Monday. I'm going to give them one more chance. I'm really tempted to lean into this pretty hard. And if I do, I want anybody who's had a bridge project to write and talk about how long it took to get it done, and that saving that year would be crucial. And I'm looking at Webo County. I think you guys had one that's actually been sitting closed, specific example. So I may do some outreach, and Commerce killed this idea last session, and we were nice about it. I'm not inclined to be nice this time.
Chantel, do you have anything else you want to add?
I got nothing.
All right, it's my favorite time, question and answer. Anything you want to throw on the table?
You're free to unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment, or you can use the chat box and we'll relay that.
Eric, Dan Ellison with Jefferson County. Maybe you could just talk for a moment about House Bill 121 and all of the other bills regarding local control of health boards.
Thank you. I probably should have addressed this as the informational update too. Recall House Bill 121 is Representative Beatty's bill. We are talking about it as being the most moderate and reasonable approach to any restrictions in public health authorities. What it does is keep the Board of Health and the local health officers' authority during pandemics and in terms of communicable disease suppression in place as they currently are, but allows for a review from the local government body after they're issuing directives or orders. So if we have another pandemic and the health officer wants to issue quarantine orders and the Board of Health wants to promulgate rules that do things like mask enforcement, they have that authority to do it. After they issue those directives or orders, they're subject to review for amendment. They're up to the board, the governing board, to rescind, amend, change in any way, shape, or form, or do what they want to do with those orders. So the theory is that it's not going to impact an immediate response that might be necessitated by some kind of pandemic or emergency. Now, what the bill does that's been, I think, misconstrued or misunderstood is that the promulgation of any regulations by the Board of Health must be subjected to the governing body for review and approval. So where they now have Indoor Air Act authority, wood smoke restriction authority. The Board of Health has very specific authorities in Title 50 where they can promulgate rules and regulations on their own. All of those under BD's bill would be subject to approval by the Board of County Commissioners. I talk about it like this. Boards of County Commissioners aren't by natural practice professional planners. You have boards of health, which are volunteers that do things like create your growth policies. They review your subdivision regulations. You have planning and zoning commissions in your areas with planning and zoning that put forth recommendations for implementation of type 1 or type 2 zoning. You have professionals that do that work that bring it up to you as Board of County Commissioners for final review and approval. It's the same system. Your public health folks, public health department, and public health professionals will be making those recommendations and submitting them for your review and approval, like your subdivision regulations. That's the exact same example that I use. The opponent's testimony on 121 was that they didn't want to put county commissioners in the position of becoming health professionals and making those kind of determinations. I'll tell you that the sponsor is absolutely adamant that they want a line of authority directly connected to the public, i.e. an elected official, making those sorts of decisions. And so he's not going to back down on that whatsoever. All the other bills that have come from a public health perspective are severely limiting, and you could even say are intentionally attempting to try and gut public health's authority. There are a variety of them out there. Some of them started in the Senate, several of them started in the House. But what's been interesting in watching them is they've come through House local government, House judiciary, Senate local government. I can't think of any, but I think some are coming through Senate judiciary. There's a shotgun and scattered approach this legislative session to try and see how much stuff they can flood through and see what happens to them. As of last night, we received word that all bills are being re-referred to House Business and Labor. If that sounds strange to you, it's because it's strange. Even bills that made it out of their House Policy Committee are being re-referred back to House Business and Labor. The makeup of House Business and Labor is such that if a conservative group interested in severely restricting public health authority wanted to do so, they have the numbers and personalities to do it in House Business and Labor. You could argue that the folks in House local government, where this all should be, and that's what we recommended to the governor's office and to the chair of local government, is that all the bills should come through House local government because they all have to deal with local government authorities. In one way, shape, or form, they're transferring health officer authority to county commissioners at the end of the day on all of these bills. That's so far not what's happening. We had a meeting with the governor's policy advisor, the specific policy advisor that's dealing with health and human services on these bills, and we're trying to convince the governor's office to do what MACo has decided to do in partnership with the league and hopefully the public health folks out there, is get behind 121 and attempt to kill all the rest of them. Now that they've all been re-referred as of last night to House Business, I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that. I wasn't sure we were going to be able to do that with the plan before because we have some difficulties on the Senate side. But that being said, the public health, there will be a public health bill that passes, and public health will have different and I think much more limited authority in the future than they have right now. Our goal is to try and help the legislature strike that balance between what is appropriate use of public health authority and what might be a deferential referral to elected officials as it relates to public health authority. You know, I don't have the right answer. I'm not a public health professional. And I'm here to tell you that the public health professionals that have acted in the past, none of you can say whether they've acted wrongly, rightly, at all. You know, this has been devastating to your public health staff. They've been overwhelmed. They've been under a gun. And I'll say, I hope we can all agree that the time to address public health authority and public health responsibilities probably isn't in the middle of a global pandemic. But we don't have that choice. It's coming and it's happening. And we'll need elected official support to try and have the legislature understand that role that public health plays and the role that governing bodies play, of which county commissioners ultimately are always in that seat of authority. Now, in order to get something reasonable through. And I'll finish with this. The chair of House local government is the most knowledgeable of local government and also a longtime legislator. And she made the point of saying to me the other day as we were talking, walking down the stairs, her committee doesn't care what MACo lobbyists say. They don't care what any lobbyists say, that they're only going to be influenced by hearing from real people and elected officials back home. So when we ask you to contact those folks, whether it's on the Senate side or House side in any committee, I think that is especially true this legislative session because of COVID and distancing and the weirdness that is the legislature. They're not likely inclined to listen to Jason and I and Chantel as persuasive as we can be in the halls and at the podium. They want to hear from you guys. And so if we ask for your help, please take that under consideration and make those contacts because they're very effective. Did that answer your question, Dan? I'm so long-winded, nobody will ask another question, will they?
We have a couple questions that came through on the chat. I'll just quickly review them so they can go into the record since the chat won't be collected in the recording. Christy Jones asked if there's an estimated time of arrival of COVID payments, and Jason responded that they're working through them, but they don't have an answer on the timing of that yet, unless, Eric, you have something different. The county leasing bill, this is from Mr. Hutton. The county leasing bill can apply to more than detention, something, SEM? Is that?
Yeah. So, Commissioner, we found an interesting provision that your ability to lease detention centers was different than the county's Title VII ability to lease any of your facilities. And so in our leasing bill, it moves the general leasing authority for a Board of County Commissioners to 40 years, and then it pulls in the detention center side of it to make it consistent and moves that to 40 years as well. I'm curious to know what the background is, why we had all facilities could be leased for only 10 years, but detention centers have different. If the bill passes, they'll all be uniform and be 40. Then the only other anomaly will be out there is a provision that says that you can't lease nursing homes for, I can't remember what the duration is, but it's different than 10 and it's different than 40.
Great. So I think we're all caught up on our chat. Is there any other questions or comments?
Oh, then I see that Commissioner Hutton already answered it before I talked. Sorry.
That's all right. For those that are on the phone that couldn't hear, couldn't see the response, it was good to have you say it. So great.
So I got a chance to talk about, especially like our the bill coming up in transportation. I see Gallatin counties on, and I'm wondering. I don't want to put them on the spot, but I'm wondering if they want to share their perspective on concerns that they have about that county road acceptance and subdivision review bill.
I guess we do. We are on the spot, right?
You don't even can say no.
It just, I don't feel satisfied that we understand, our county attorney's response that if this is really to solve a problem in Ravalli County about this one road, Aaron Arnold's proposal about why not just make that clear in the existing statute by adding one line that says that you don't have responsibility for these if you don't want them, that takes care of it instead of throwing all this other stuff into the mix. That's just our concern, right? It seems like an overcomplicated solution to something that is a singular problem. It isn't a problem for the rest of us.
I think I understand. And
what we don't want is to ask our clerk and recorder and our county attorney and our planning department to have to go back through resolution and redesignate every road that's under our jurisdiction over the last 100 years. We have a lot of those, and it just doesn't make practical sense. So, and maybe we're not, I guess our legal department is not exactly convinced that the savings clause solution will address that concern, but maybe we can be talked back from that initial conclusion.
So one of the things that I like about our association is that, MACo proper is going to take a position on a bill that one of our members is going to oppose. Knowing that helps me and what my testimony is going to be like and be more deferential to our members who have concerns. And then that ultimately helps us all work on potential amendments to the bill that can get everybody satisfied. So thanks, Gallatin, for letting me know you were going to be opposed to that. And I think your concerns are not unfounded, and if there's a way that we can work on amendments or refocusing what the intent of that bill is, I'm telling you, I will do that on your behalf and Ravalli County's behalf and everybody else. Moral of the story is, if MACo takes a position on something, please, and you don't agree with it, please let us know prior to the hearing.
Understood.
Advice, Eric.
Any other questions? Chantel's itching to answer a question of some kind. Boy, I turn it back over to you, Mr. Clerk.
All right, thank you, Jason and Eric and Chantel. Appreciate your update and report. Oh, Webo County just came in. Darren has a question. Webo County would like to say thanks to the staff at MACo. Oh yes, this is good. Thanks. And they're great people who work very hard for all of us. Thanks again for the hard work. So big thanks, Dan Clark. That's me for all that we do. And we appreciate the work that you guys do. And it is great partnership, I think, for all of us. And we appreciate your willingness to step up and serve your communities the way you do. And it's an honor for us to help you in doing the work that you are for the citizens of Montana. So I think it's right back at you. Anything else that you guys want to say before we close this session off? Our next one will be in another 2 weeks. We'll have these scheduled for every 2 weeks up until pretty close to the end of the session, and we'll see how things look and how we'll kind of morph this and what it might look like moving forward beyond the session. But we're really appreciative of your time and participation in this. So anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn for 2 weeks?
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. We'll see you, folks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great one.